Hey guys, I'm Chris.
And I'm Mike.
And welcome back to this week's No Limits, the Scot Harvath Podcast. We are upgrading over here, people. I just had the full sound in my ear. How are you doing today, Mike?
I'm good. Yeah, Riverside. We've been recording on it for a few months now, and this platform is awesome. They're definitely helping us with our audio quality, our video and live stream that we did last week. I think onwards and upwards for the podcast from here on out.
Boom, baby. Yeah. Go check out I subscribe to us. Well, I subscribe to us on all of them, but I listen to our podcast on Spotify, and it's nice. Spotify, you can both watch and listen to podcasts on there. So yeah, you can go check out our Denied Access as well as our Plum Island. You posted the videos of that. And yeah, you recently also on the No Limits Thriller podcast, we did a little rewind. We might not, I think we will, but I definitely want to talk to you again about it. But if you guys are eager, you heard our Denied Access stuff, you're eager just as much as we are. Go check out right now. Mike recut together all of our parts for both American Assassin and, which episode I got electrocuted on, remember? And Kill Shot. Each of those is running I think the American Assassin one is like 2.5 hours. The Kill Shot one is just under 2 hours.
Yeah.
Plenty to wet your whistle before we get a chance to do that. Because we have a lot of other books we want to cover until then. And we don't have to worry about that until it's not coming out till September. We got time. But if you're eager right now, go ahead, check those out.
It's a little rewind. And just a small clarification. We originally covered American Assassin and Kill Shot years ago on the Mitch Rapp Podcast, but we're rewinding, publishing those old episodes on No Limits, the Thriller Podcast, because for you guys, the Scot Harvath crew, you should also know we're going to be transitioning to our main feed, the Thriller Podcast, as soon as Edge of Honor comes out, the 2025 Scot Harvath book. So we got Spymaster here tonight. We got Backlash coming at you next week. So we are here on the Scot Harvath Podcast all the way through the published books, the already published books. Shadow of Doubt we covered. Then after that, moving forward, 2025 and beyond, Scot Harvath, Mitch Rapp, all of our content will be coming out on No Limits, the Thriller Podcast. So be sure to subscribe to that feed on Spotify and now YouTube. Chris, you hinted at our video content. You can also find us on YouTube. We're even making a lot of little shorts to help promote on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Insta. So make sure you follow us wherever you can find us. It really goes a long way. The more comments, more engagement, likes, reposts we have. It's the reason we do it. It's the fuel that keeps our fire burning. So,
yeah. If not, I don't know. I mean, I enjoyed talking to you about books too. So
I think we'd honestly probably do one book a month.
Yeah,
I think that would be it. And right now
we could have our own little personal
4
book club. Yeah,
yeah. Well, that's all we would do. We would do the patron book club. Our patrons help us keep going, so we do the book club with them every couple of months. We'd probably cover one book a month. And that'd be it. But thanks to you guys, the audience's engagement, we're full steam ahead.
Yeah, and we're chugging along. Scot Harvath, number 17 of 24. I saw. That's crazy. The fact that we've gotten here. Spymaster, we're here. We're here with this arc we've been talking about for a while now. I can't wait to get to this arc. I think really that arc is really starting in the last couple books. We immediately kick off and get some hints that all right, we're following up, not directly on use of force, but, on some things that particularly happened in the previous one. And then they were kind of touched on again in use of force. I guess that was acts of war, right? So yeah, I mean, I'm excited to talk to you about this arc. Massive cliffhanger.
Yeah.
We're recording this all in one go because we had Denied Access be so big last week. We had to reschedule our podcasting schedule. So I think
spoiler warning, because I don't think we can avoid talking about it.
No, I don't think so either. So we're gonna cut this in two. First half is we're gonna just talk about our reactions, the plot, do our limerick. And then we'll cut the second half where we'll do our scorecard, and then I think, dive into some other, the meat of it. So yeah, I think, right off the bat, what a crazy cliffhanger.
I mean, I can't remember an ending like this since the book where, was it Tracy who gets shot?
Yeah.
And then the troll left the dogs, with the note. So like we're thinking it's him, but it's really not. She drops dead. And it's like the way you ended that book, I haven't felt that way in a long time. And Spymaster did it. Now, I remember the ending of Spymaster being a bombshell because Backlash picks up with Scott in a dark place. He's taken, dark place. So like I remember there was this major bombshell event. But the details and the nitty gritty, like I didn't remember it was Arthur who's the secret mole. He's really Matterhorn. And like the book was called Spymaster. And when we're going through it, I'm like, kind of want more Reed Carlton. Like he's just this old infirm man losing his mind. Like I remember him going out with such a bang. And then Brad Thor's a dog, dude. He is a dog. He had me going this whole book. And meanwhile, like Brad Thor does, he was playing chess. We were all playing checkers, and he was playing chess. Lydia Ryan, Reed Carlton, Scot Harvath. They were playing chess the whole time, and we didn't even know it. They were setting the pieces. This whole operation, the A plot, the B plot, and the C plot of this book were all a ruse that we, the reader, didn't even know about, and the hints were so subtle, you wouldn't have been able to put it together. And so while I'm reading the book, I'm like, why do I remember this one being so good? Some things don't check out. The buy-in isn't amazing. This doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. Yet in the end, when it was all revealed, my mind was blown. It was like I just got played. The audience got played. Reed Carlton was doing some deep cover shit. He had this super secret op going down. Absolutely amazing. It when it unraveled at the end and we learned what was really going on throughout the whole book, everything fit together and it blew my mind.
Yeah, no, and like, right before we get, the reaction of Scott, like seeing Laura, she's running and but she screams to him, run, right?
Yeah, run.
Before that, like Scott's riding high because, again, right, Brad hasn't let us into the ruse. Like I think we could talk about like some subtle hints that I think he puts in.
So subtle though.
For the most part, we don't fully understand that picture until the end. And I think like a lot of it, I was feeling like disappointed, like in the sense that like, man, he's dying like that. Scott is like, yeah, he's winning, but he's kind of like losing. They're not getting enough information out of him. It's just like this weird transition of power.
Yeah.
They lost these upgrade kits. Like how the hell could they let that happen?
They just parked in the parking lot and, didn't watch them. And meanwhile, there's like nuclear weapon equipment. I'm like, what?
And meanwhile, like on the backdrop, this, quote unquote, like new terrorist group gets off multiple like crazy ass attacks. So like you're kind of behind the gun. And, ultimately like Scott has to get a guy to save the day. But at the end, they get this list of people, that they can go after. But they've also stoked massive fear in the Russians.
Yeah.
And, that twist that the whole time he's like, you need to give me Matterhorn. I'll do it for Matterhorn. And it's like, I can't give it to you. Yeah, I can't give it to you because that's you, bro.
Yeah. You. But I was sold on this, like, Reed's the only one who knows it and he's losing his mind. So there's no way we can make sense of it and understand it. But he was capable enough to set this thing up. The Matterhorn thing might have been one of the most fun parts of the book because when he's asking for Matterhorn, he's like, I'll find these nukes for you, these upgrade kits. I'll get you in touch with it. I will do a full investigation. He even has his Polish authorities and investigators go into Minsk, go into Belarus. So we're getting this guy, Arthur, who's supposed to be an old friend, right, of Reed Carlton. They talk about a mission during Desert Storm, where the Poles helped us free some hostages. And like we were forever grateful to the Poles, but also to this individual, Arthur, who was the one on the ground with Reed Carlton. And like this amazing backstory. But at some point, and man, would that be fun to see one day in a little novella, how did Arthur turn? And it'd be like maybe the Russians approached him and Reed Carlton and Reed didn't take the deal. Arthur did, but Reed didn't know that. And so like the two of them had this split, and Reed knew that Arthur probably took the deal and was working for the Russians, but he kept that under wraps. And so he is Matterhorn. He is the highest level agent we have, you know, in Russia, but he's actually a Polish intelligence operative who's working to undermine Eastern Europe and make them more vulnerable from the inside for Russia. And the old man knew it. And the old man laid this trap. And the trap was amazing that we had nuclear weapons with the Griffins, and we were providing them an upgrade kit that got lost, which is an amazing ruse because the crux of it is the weapons are already there.
Right.
The Poles, the Lithuanians, the Latvians, they already have these things. So the upgrade kits would just be an extra, but it spooks the Russians into thinking, shit, they have these weapons all ready to go. Because
Where
another issue,
they're not supposed to have them. Like, why? How did they get past us?
there was a disarmament treaty. Like, is NATO really putting nukes on Russia's border and all these countries? So it scares the shit out of the Russians. Meanwhile, it's not true. And it just delayed their invasion because we knew they were going after the Baltic states. And all of this confusion and fear-mongering that Reed let loose with this, I really should say Lydia Ryan let loose with this plan, it stops the Russians. So I was wondering, this whole book, we're like waiting for them to do something, waiting for the Russians to make the move or go to Gotland or start the operation. And Trebuchov is planning it from Kaliningrad. And like, I'm like, let's go. But they were delayed out of fear of the Griffins. That was masterful.
Yeah, they couldn't move until they had secured that. Yeah,
exactly.
And I think what I love about this, if you want to call it the B plot, is, you know, thinking that he really has lost his mind, you know, because they play it up because that gets leaked out, and that gets, you know, because they need to show this appearance that he truly is like they move him to a special facility in North Hampshire, like he's a nuke, like they call it, like Scott calls him a nuke. And then also Lydia's playing this perfect, she's a good spy but not that good of a spy because he can pick up on different things, like when they go to the Russia House, great restaurant by the way.
Yeah, I haven't been.
Or they go to, you know,
Restaurant de la Perla.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And she's like, remember when she accepts the liquor and kind of opens up, and he's like,
yes,
oh, yeah, I'm like, but it was all like, she was playing with him.
They were each playing each other. Mm-hmm. They were each playing each other.
And what's great about it, that Reed had been giving him both real information the entire time.
Yep. And nonsense.
Knowing and nonsense.
Yeah.
You have to, in order to be a good, like, turn,
you got to jumble it up.
You have to jumble up. You have to give them both. But also full well knowing that any sort of real intelligence you give, he's going to turn around and give it to the Russians. Yeah. Like, it's the perfect mole.
Yeah.
Mole that doesn't even know he's a mole.
It's a mole story. He doesn't even know he's a mole. He doesn't even know that people are onto him and know that he's the mole. And it also makes me question of how bad was Reed Carlton's mind? Was that even upplayed to screw with people?
So. I think so.
I think it was bad, but maybe not as bad as they're making it seem. Like for Scott,
I think it was all like a ruse because obviously he had like people looking in on him or asking questions, and so anybody that, you know, they had to play the part, right?
Right.
I'm sure there's bits and pieces of the truth, but when he blabbered to the maid, was that really because he was, out of his mind, or
was that a setup?
To? Yeah, exactly.
Was that a setup? Was that part of the story to fool guys like Arthur and other people? And there's this moving scene because he's on this island, Lake Winnipesaukee, and Scott knows he's going on these ops. I guess the ones over the last few books. You mentioned some of these attacks that they're responding to happened foreign agent? He said use of force, foreign agent, the last 2 or 3 books.
Yeah, because he says he's been gone for a couple months.
He's been gone for a couple months, and they have this real moving scene where they embrace. Son. He says, you've been a good son, and Scott's just thinking about his own father. They didn't have the best relationship. He became a SEAL because his dad had the accident at Coronado on the training mission. And that was just such a moving scene. Whether or not you know these characters for 10, 15, whatever books or not, this is your first one, I think it's a great introduction when you get those very heartfelt moments like that. And you get some amazing quotes here. The book's called Spymaster. I picked up 2 times it's used. One early on when they're giving Carlton's backstory and describing him, but then at the end,
At the very end, yeah.
when Scott says, or somebody says, like, he's now the
He's the
Spymaster.
Spymaster now. I caught that.
Yeah. And I just love that use of it. But listen to this quote, because this is how Carlton's described, and what a legendary way for this guy to go out. Carlton had been a legend in the intelligence business. The Spymaster's Spymaster. He was brilliant. To have his mind taken from him was the cruelest twist of all. It robbed the nation of one of its greatest treasures. He literally knew where all the bodies were buried. Names, dates, accounts, passwords, places, times, who had screwed whom, who owed whom. He was a walking encyclopedia of global espionage information, and it was all slipping away quickly.
That reminds me of like all the stuff that like Thomas Stansfield had on, like when he left to Irene, like, this dossier of like literally everything. Like, he is that person in this universe. I mean, just a great guy. We got to pour one out. Well, in the beginning days of the No Limits Mitch Rapp Podcast, when we were trying
episodes.
We were trying to fill content, not realizing that we were going to, branch out and do other books. We were just sticking to one thing. We would do tribute episodes whenever, like, it was the last time we saw a character. Yeah, Reed Carlton, man, really great character. From the very rip, bringing on Scott, kind of being that Gary Lawler replacement in the series.
Yeah,
I think like once he comes aboard, we really don't see much of Gary, if at all. And I think going forward, we're like, obviously Scott, or Brad had an inkling he wanted to bring that, he needed to bring that kind of character back, and that's why we get Gary Lawler.
And this really
future books.
This really opens the path to that. And another way is like Lydia Ryan was going to take over. Well,
I know, and it clears the deck with that. I was really upset because I liked her as a character. In the past couple of books, ever since we met her. It was like her and McGee doing this like rogue mission by themselves, right?
Yeah.
That was
a while ago.
Yeah. Because then that's
5,
what
6
leads
books.
to them being tapped to
and getting promoted. And how McGee was going to take the top dog spot so that he could do the political deflection, and she can actually run the ops as deputy. Like, that was a whole plan because the two had worked so well together on that other book. Oh, what book was that?
Yeah, I'm blanking on what book that was, but
it was probably like the one before Code of Conduct, maybe somewhere in that range. Was it Act of War? No, I think it was even before that.
Was it Hidden Order?
But that just shows you like how deep Spymaster is. Basically the culmination of not just the last 2-3 books because of these direct attacks that it has been building, but 10, 12 books because of the characters. Even, Chase Palmer, right? Being here. Sloane Ashby, going back to the Athena times. McGee, Lydia Ryan, Lara, when she was brought in, Nicholas being brought in.
Hidden Order is when Lara's brought in. That's the first.
Lara. Okay.
That's the first one.
McGee and Ryan were probably right before that one. We're going to have to go back into the archives, man. Dig up the old notes. But you see how Spymaster is really like this summative piece? It's a summative of all these characters like Haney, Stalin, Morrison, Gage, Barton. It's just crazy. I thought one issue I had with the Harvath series was that it was a little disjointed in that every book we get a new team up. And while that was happening for a while, little bits and pieces of those team ups spilled over. And then those pieces came together. And ultimately, the last few books, we had the team. Instead of just a random team up for a book, it became the team. It became Scott's team. And that's been a lot of fun to watch develop. And to watch it develop long term is really a blast.
Yeah. So if you think about, like, you have the first part, it's kind of like 3 arcs now with the Thor series, right? You have our first introduction to Scott,
and Gary,
and the transition from the Secret Service into this OIIA, right?
Yep.
And
you have the height of the OIIA phase 2.
Where's a couple books where he's in that, and then you have, bringing in, at the time you brought in the Troll, and then you get the Trolls like reversal, and then bringing in, him leaving the OIIA, going with
Carlton Group.
The Carlton Group. You have that whole like the guy who's actually a mole, the British guy, right? Like I remember
Yep.
that story arc,
Yep.
and then again bringing in Lara, like you said, bringing in all these characters, and I think it's great. But now it's almost like a full reset. I guess we are going to continue to have the Troll. We're going to continue to have McGee. You can obviously bring back Lawler.
It's a new phase, though. This is going to kick off a new phase. I feel like Spymaster was the summative, and just this cliffhanger ending. Yes, Backlash is like almost part 2 of this story, but it's really coming into its own because once you hit Black Ice and Near Dark, and like Gary Lawler's coming back to run things. It's almost like a refresh.
Sure.
You know, it's like a refresh to like the olden days. So this one I think really is the summation of all things Reed Carlton.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
And I think it's a aptly titled book because of that.
Yeah, exactly.
Even though he's not really in the book, like but his presence, everything that he's built, ultimately like this crazy plot, to trick Matterhorn is because of him.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't work without him. So,
and it's interesting because it almost, as I was reading it, even though I knew the ending, all right, like I remembered it, but since I didn't remember all the details, I was falling into every trap. I do wonder if, as a new reader, this book is so much better on reread, second, third, fourth time, because I'm looking for some of these things. Sure. Like I think it was the first meeting with Arthur and Lydia Ryan. It had a little line like, this clandestine meeting was not supposed to seem so clandestine. And I was like, what does that mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Because they want the Russians to see them.
Mm-hmm,
or even, if we could talk about the D plot, I would say it's the D plot. You have Ambassador Strum, I think her name was, at the UN.
Right.
And we're in the Security Council meeting, and she leaves, and she makes like a big scene of it of like, my aide will sit in for me. And it's like, oh, that's cueing the Russians to go see what she's up to. And some deputy something of press for Russia or something is sitting in the cafe. And I'm like, why are they having this meeting with the Latvian, Lithuanian, Estonian ambassadors, all the Baltic ambassadors, with the U.S. ambassador over coffee? And they could see them storm out, see there's a rift, and it was all a show, and they wanted the Russians to see it. Well, in my mind, I'm like, I keep hearing about this old man. I don't see him. They're doing amateur things like that at the UN. This wouldn't happen. And then when the missiles get lost or the upgrade kits get lost, I'm like, they just parked the cars in a parking lot and then left them alone with nuclear grade equipment, like weapons equipment. All of this is not adding up. And then we never cut back to them. I'm like, so these guys are driving these missiles through like Poland and Belarus and across the border, and we don't really know who they are, the Russians don't seem to know them. Arthur doesn't know them. Lydia Ryan is saying she wants to track it down. She doesn't know what's going on. I'm like, are we going to introduce another player here? Like this other rogue
thinking,
element?
like, how is that going to come into about? And like, we're not going to have any time with him.
Yeah.
But when it's revealed that it's Sloane and Ashby, I went back and I re-listened to the first part of this book today, like, because just while I was working from home, and I got to that chapter, and I'm like, oh, I could kind of like Armando and Brad did a good job of like not tipping it, but there's certain things like, first of all, they talk in English. Like he doesn't say they speak in another language. He just writes them in English.
So subtle.
It's
subtle.
Like super subtle.
You wouldn't know there's a male and a female.
Exactly. But the way, let's say they were Russians or they were Chinese, Brad would have wrote it as,
would have referenced it,
speaking in Chinese, it, but you don't pick up on that when you're just reading it the first time.
No, you don't. And the scene just seemed kind of blah, kind of gray, because if it was Chinese, Russians, whoever, there would have been all these really cool details about like where they're from and who they're working for and like what's the aim and the attack, and they have to report to a guy, and none of that was happening. It was just such a grayly written, dully written scene. And it turns out, because it's all fake, it's all supposed to be the show and this on the stage.
And I'm almost positive is that the same like garage that they go to,
the car wash thing.
Yeah,
I don't know, but it definitely
the car wash
that way.
is in Kaliningrad, right?
That's true, because they're trying to get out.
That's
across
in Poland.
The lake.
That's across the border from Belarus. So wrong
Yeah.
wrong side of Poland.
Some of those scenes seemed eerily similar, though, the way they read. And another downside is probably that car wash thing. The lake thing was awesome, but getting to the lake, I have a couple of quibbles. Maybe I'll save them for winners, losers at the end.
There's like at the 80% mark of this book.
I was like, what are we doing here?
It kind of lost me for a second, and then
Same.
it brought me back. But it just like was too much. But yeah, we'll get to that.
Well, we'll get to it. But you know what it was? It was supposed to seem like high-paced action, yet everyone was just taking naps. Like back-to-back chapters, they went to sleep. And like usually in these books, and they were even writing it like, this is such a strenuous operation that if you can get a few minutes of sleep, you take it. Yet it was like 4 or 5 chapters in a row where Scott and everyone else just took naps. Once when they were in the truck, once when they were in the car wash. I think before they even left Gotland or on the plane from out of Gotland. There were multiple times they were all just sleeping, and it was back-to-back chapters. I was like, this is not usually what happens.
That's probably like my least favorite part. But yeah.
Yeah, you're right about that. So all these things, though, added up to not a great buy-in as I'm reading the book. You know, the whole, you're not getting enough Carlton. Would these things really happen? Why does this seem so strange? I didn't know if I could buy into a lot of these things as we were going. But damn, you give me that ending and everything falls into place. And I was played. It felt great. It's like the Peacock and the Sparrow. That's how I felt at the end of that one.
Right. Very much so. Yeah. Dude, and this kicks off with like a hell of an opening scene.
Sure.
Like we're
Norway.
And I love when Brad and other authors do it too, but like, it's your main character, but they don't officially say it's the main character until like a little bit later. So like, you're like kind of, third person POV, don't know, not omniscient.
Sure.
And they're on this raid, and these two people are tagging along, but they're not allowed to have weapons. And it's like, oh, this is weird. And one's a guy, he looks like he could handle himself, but like whatever. And then like shit pops off. It's an ambush. They knew they were coming. Scott like immediately goes after a dude, shoots him, kills him. Of course, he brought a gun with him. And I'm just getting this eerily, I guess because a lot of the imagery for online for this book is that the cover, like, I'm thinking of, what was that one cover with the wolf?
Oh yeah. Wolf Trap.
Yeah.
Connor Sullivan.
Like, just in the
with
woods,
the tracks,
snow.
Yep.
Love that opening scene.
The taiga and the dense forest, and they're coming up on this cabin. Yeah, it was great. Yet all the trees as they approach the cabin are, it's a trap. They're loaded up, with the mines that go off. Really good scene. A pretty decent introduction to Monica Yashinsky.
Right.
She's this NATO representative, I guess. Would you call her an investigator? I don't know how to.
I took it as she's like an intelligence operative for NATO that runs investigations and stuff like that.
More on the investigative side, yeah.
Because ultimately, right after this, we sort of get this period of time where her and Scott, like, he's trying to build trust with her. He's trying to get her to buy in. He's not telling her everything. We're learning about her backstory. And like, it's told to us that she pieced together the 3 previous attacks, that they're actually all related. And that this other attack in Norway, it was the same group, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so she's really good on the intelligence side, and she like has all the history of Eastern Europe, and on the political.
I would say she's the equivalent of like a case officer in CIA, but for NATO.
Who tracks, like a tracker, exactly. Yeah, and she's doing that for Russian aggression, and she's the one who put together the pieces that Russia's planning an invasion somewhere. And what brings the trust together with her and Scott is Carl Pedersen, Norwegian intelligence services, and he's yet another one of these old-timey guys, I get the sense, who has gravitas. It's like he's almost the Norwegian Carlton. Or later on, this Lars Lund, who we don't end up getting to meet, but he's the Swedish version of these guys.
Right.
And he's supposed to be their contact in Gotland, and he gets taken out by the Russian cell. So I feel like having this Pedersen, this Lars Lund, even though we don't meet him, a lot of these characters are hearkening back to Carlton's network. Sure. It's almost like this book is not just Carlton the Spymaster, it's his network of Spymasters, and how the Cold War era, all these guys were working together to stop Russia. And now they're all working, as the senior leadership in the intelligence services to stop Russia. And they're still networking and supporting one another. And I think he comes back, Pedersen, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, he comes back at the end. Yeah.
Well, I mean, in the series, too.
Oh, in the series. I don't remember that.
I forget, but when we go to, what's her name now?
Solvay.
I was going to say Sonia from Mitch Rapp, but yeah, Solvay. I thought he might still be around in Norwegian intelligence, but could be a different guy.
Because Solvay's also from Norway, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I kind of like that opening Norway scene, and we're going all across Scandinavia and the Baltics.
We have a heavy traveling heavy.
We're traveling heavy, but it's kind of cool that it's regional.
I will say, I feel like a majority of this book was in Gotland.
I would say at least that whole middle chunk for sure.
Yeah, like you have the first bit, Norway to Belgium, and then then they got to go to Gotland, right?
Gotland for most of the book,
and then we're a decent
Kaliningrad and Poland.
Yeah, and that's it.
Yeah, the lake scene.
Lithuania.
Yeah, basically from Lithuania, Kaliningrad, Poland, that whole Baltic corridor. I think it makes sense, though. I think even if we're traveling heavy, it's not too heavy, and it's all centered around a theme that comes back to the plot. Because our problem with traveling too heavy was these places are disconnected. We're just globe hopping so they could take the Gulf Stream, and go somewhere cool. And here, there's definitely reason to be hopping across the Baltic to these particular countries, especially with the Russian threat looming.
I loved everything in Gotland.
100%.
Gotland, I think, was my favorite part of this book. Outside of the whole ending Matterhorn stuff. It's kind of like this eerie, suspenseful thing, because they don't know who they can trust. You meet these cops right off the bat on the tarmac, and did you get the vibe that I was kind of not remembering all the details. I was kind of suspicious of
the cop,
the police chief.
Yeah, wasn't his name Nyland or something? Nyland,
and come to find out, it's actually one of his deputies that is also on the payroll. But yeah, we get the funny. Got to have the funny honey trap scene at the bar,
of course. Brad being Brad.
Brad being Brad.
Nystrom, that's the cop.
Nice. Nystrom.
Nystrom. Yeah.
But even with that, there's some cool she has to. Sloane's able to get this guy. I'm gonna butcher all the names today, but able to get this guy out who his mom is the mayor of Gotland.
Oh, and right.
So she's able to get him out. Sparman. They take him, but the Spetsnaz are all in there, and Monica has to get out of there. That whole scene of her, she throws grease or water on
throws the breaker,
runs out the back, has to quickly stack up these
Train
things
the
to
pallets,
get over.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, someone's chasing her. All that was so suspenseful. And then, of course, she turns around and Scott's not there anymore, but that's because he's on the roof ready to pull her up.
Yeah.
Love that.
And that was the Spetsnaz guy that she was flirting with inside.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. While Sloane Ashby was getting Sparman out. And when I saw that, I was like, okay, another bar scene, honey trap. The villains are all out clubbing, and you got to find a way to poke their vulnerabilities. So you do it with the women, dolling them up. I was like, oh, we're doing this again. But then they didn't go too heavy into it.
Banter with Sloane, it was really funny.
It was good. It was funny. Yeah.
Adds to some comic relief in the middle of the book.
It's good enough, but it's I kind of just want something to break the mold. It's almost too formulaic at this point to use the women this way.
And they also brought in Bella again. Bella is their MacGuffin.
Gotta love Bella. That's another kind of way this is the end of an era is we've used the interrogations with Vela, and this time he's coming in from Malta instead of us going to Malta. We've used that a lot the last few books. That's been a crutch we've really relied on. I don't remember that keeping up from this point forward too much. His services.
I don't know if we ever go back to Vela.
Yeah, that's another very particular thing about this phase in time.
Mm-hmm.
I also like how these Spetsnaz guys have like a cell, and their cover is that the mayor's son
Farmers.
who owns this farm, exactly, they're all working on this collective, which I'm sure is very true in countries like Sweden and most European countries, is they have Eastern or Southeastern Europeans who come in and do a bunch of odd jobs and are on like workers' visas and things. So I kind of really bought that this team was working together. But when they scope them out, Scott's like, these dudes are drilling. Like, they're not just farm working.
They're
they
running
are
in a formation.
running in formation. They are drilling. They are training. And
doing the salutes.
And that's when he knows they're Spetsnaz. Yeah. So I kind of like that canvassing Gotland. We're going across Scotland. And even Scott goes to the hospital to see Lars Lund. He's almost acting like a detective, where Nystrom takes him to the hospital. And what's interesting is that's how the Russians get video footage of him, because under this alias, he's in the hospital, and Trebuchov knows his name when they finally meet up. Or Kuznetsov. Kuznetsov is one of the guys on Gotland, and he already knows who Scott is, and they trap him and corner him, and it's all because they saw this hospital footage. And then from the hospital, they know he wants to go see the car. He sees the scratch on the car, and he matches the green paint to the green paint on the vehicles at the farm. You're right. Gotland is perhaps the best. I don't know if it's the best sequence of this book, because like the lake action sequence, the opening sequence, all those are really good. But Gotland is almost the best setting, almost like the best backdrop. I don't think there's one Gotland sequence that's the best, like an action sequence, but overall it's the best backdrop.
Yeah, because you're right. We get this almost murder mystery like genre thrown in here with, showing up. Lars Lund is not there. Scott doesn't know. Gotten team don't know who the hell they can trust. He's keeping all the information, even though, like you said, he sees that olive mark is there, but he doesn't tell the police chief. He's, having to work outside the lines, sort of tread. You can't really tell him what he does, why he's there, who Lars Lund is, all this stuff. And meanwhile, he has to, do what he does best. Canvas, track, hunt, capture, illicit information. And we get not one, but then he brings in Nystrom into his trust and goes after this butcher character. Very interesting dude. And we have a cool shootout there, or not a shootout, like a knife, like, because he's a butcher, right? He pulls the knife, cuts it. Scott immediately takes him out, then has to drive all the way, to the hospital, saves the day. I don't know. I really enjoyed everything on Gotland. I guess I felt the scenery. I feel like
Agreed.
Brad did a really good job of, telling me that. So the cover of the book, not to jump ahead too much, but the cover of the Kindle or Everand edition, I'm almost positive it's Gotland, and I'm almost positive it's the cathedral in Gotland.
That's a pretty cool get, because I didn't put that together. We're going to have to talk about that. But if that is Visby, right?
In Visby, it's capital.
The big city. I didn't think to look that one up, surprisingly. I bet that thing on the spire, it looks like, is it just a flag, or is there some sort of sculpture up there? I don't know. But it does have the Lithuanian cross. So we're going to have to talk about how these covers, at least from what you see on the outside, are very, very much by the book.
Yeah.
If we're going to judge a cover by the book, these pull that off.
Very much so.
Yeah. Before we wrap up part one, though, because we're going to get to our scorecard, maybe we'll also start the next part with a little bit of this plot. I have a little bone to pick. Or maybe I'm reading this wrong. There was a scene where Scott was in the shower. I think it's after the Gotland stuff wraps up. And there's an age reference, because we know Scott is old, but he felt like he was about 24 after he came out refreshed from the shower. It says he felt like he was about 24, which was over 2 decades ago. So we're talking as of Spymaster, he's already at least 44 years old.
Yeah.
So current day, he's definitely in his 50s, but we have a lot of books between this and Shadow of Doubt. I just thought,
Brad does some interesting stuff with aging. I feel like in the beginning, he was moving on pretty fast, and then slows down, and then speeds up, and then we're in a slow down period where we haven't really aged. Like the events of the past couple of books have been back to back to back.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it makes sense when you have like a story arc like this into Backlash, like those are things that are taking direct place. But, you know, he obviously said like the last 3 books were taking place over the past year. Yeah,
I guess it makes sense.
When we meet him, he's in his late 30s as a Secret Service agent. Because you got to think about it. This guy
had a career.
Had a career
out of the
as a a professional skier.
Well, he was on the ski team, right? Then he goes SEALs. That was the college.
Then he goes to USC.
Yeah. Well, that's where he skied, right? Was he on their ski team?
It was a college, and then goes professional.
I guess, so because he was training for Olympics and stuff too.
And then
so that's early 20s.
Then he goes back and becomes a SEAL.
So that's probably mid 20s.
He's on SEAL 2, the Polar SEALs.
Yep, SEAL 6.
And then he moves to DevCrew.
Yeah.
Then he gets recruited by the Secret Service, and it seems like he's a pretty far along at the Secret Service.
Yeah. Because he's got some time.
He mentions he does some things with money in the beginning, like everybody does.
Then presidential detail.
And then moves into different details.
Yeah.
So
you got to imagine if he doesn't have those years, he's not getting on Book Bag's detail. No, not Book Bag. I always call her Book Bag from West Wing. What's her? Goldilocks.
Goldilocks, the detail.
I do that every friggin' time. President's daughter's code names. Yeah.
So imagine when we meet him in Lions, he's maybe
you're right, early mid-30s. Yeah, you're right. It's just for me to think that he's already mid to late 40s as of Spymaster. And I remember, I think it was Deadfall. They talk about how, he's still popping pills. He's been
in this one,
he's taking steroids.
He's taking the Hulk juice. He mentions that.
Yeah.
Right?
So I guess you're right. I guess I pictured him just a little younger than that. Because I think of these books. Yeah, but I think of these books as so much earlier in the series that I'm like, oh, those were the old days, a younger Scott. And I'm like, he never really was that young, especially on the more recent books.
Yeah, we've never gotten. It'd be cool to. I wonder if Brad would be interested in going back. Everyone's doing it now, going back and doing, like a SEAL day, or like when he's in SEAL Team 6. Like, wouldn't that be cool?
Well, that, and you can also put it with whatever Reed Carlton was doing with guys like this Arthur, and how he knew he sold out to the Russians, and maybe Lars Lund, even though we never see him here, he seems like this figure that could be very important. I think that would be a lot of fun to do.
I want to know what this accident was with Scott's father.
I think it was a training accident in Coronado, if I recall.
But what if it wasn't? What if it's a cover-up?
It's explained away somewhere that it's unfortunately not common, but it's not uncommon that these things do happen.
I always thought that would be interesting to like go back and see that dynamic.
If there's
you have Scott as a character, but the main action is like with his dad in the SEALs,
Yeah, it even talks about how they didn't have a great relationship.
Yeah.
This book kind of makes that clear. That's why the you've been a good son line hit so hard coming from Reed. Damn, yeah. I mean, a lot of that would be fun. I think that pretty much wraps up Gotland. Why don't we start part 2 with this Halo jump, right? Going into Kaliningrad. Is there anything in between? Because I know once they take the cell down in Gotland, that pretty much gives them the info to know where Trebikov is hiding out in Kaliningrad.
Yeah, the only thing that I guess we can mention now or pick it up is the fact that the Butcher just wants to make a deal. Did you find that interesting? Like every other person that we have used Bella to get information out, like they hold out until they can't. When this guy's like, this is one of the times where Scott goes to sleep, and he's immediately like woken up like a couple hours later because the guy's like, yeah, I want to make a deal.
He's ready to talk. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it caught me a little off guard. What caught me off guard more was how much he wanted out of the deal.
His entire his
whole family,
yeah.
extended family, all taken to another European country and
To
resettled
Italy.
and protected to Italy. Yeah, and given citizenship or passports or whatever. Yeah, interesting. He says a line like where Scott says, "You don't have much time, buddy. You have no bargaining power. Every minute you wait, your case gets less likely." And he's like, contraire. I have the time, because if you guys don't get the info I have and these attacks go off, every minute I wait, I get more bargaining power.
Right.
So he's like saying, you need my information, yet he's begging to cut a deal so soon instead of holding out. Maybe it's just the power of Vela.
The Vela did put the fear stuff on him. So.
It's the power of Vela, yeah.
Yeah, it's the power of Vela. Yeah. All right, we'll pick up with the Halo jump in part 2.